This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest!
Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back with Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown Detroit Lions!
What's up, everybody? It is another episode of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am Jason Jarvie, and with me as always, to laugh about the Michigan Wolverines' misfortune, is John the Doc Macaron. What's up?
Okay, we got to get right into it. Did JT Barrett cross the line, hit the 15-yard line? Have you looked at all the Photoshop pictures? Have you looked at all the Ohio State side, the Michigan side? In your opinion, when you saw the play, did he get and earn the first down?
I mean, obviously, what I will preface this with is that I'm very biased. I didn't want Michigan to win that game. That being said, though, initially when I saw it, I thought the ball actually crossed the line at first. And I know it was a weird-looking hit, but I initially thought that it at least made it there. And I've looked at a lot of different things. And sure, if you're looking at just a screen cap where they're saying, oh, this is where the ball is and this is where the line is, that's just a screen cap. You have to actually look at the replay, and a good replay to get an accurate thing. And what I came to when I'm watching the game is that they call it a first down, and as they're showing the replays, every time that if you're going to get it overturned, it needs to be definitive evidence. And I really don't think there was enough definitive evidence for them to overturn that call.
No, exactly. It's one of those things where how could you make that call in Columbus? My goodness. I know that people are complaining that some of the refs were from Ohio and one of the refs was disqualified like 10 years ago. Why is he reffing a game like this? And we're going to talk all about it. I guess we'll start there. We will talk about the Michigan game because it was one of those things where, if Michigan was going to lose, being that we're two Sparty guys, that was the best way to do it where, Michigan plays well at first. They kind of stall out in the fourth quarter. They get to overtime. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's a controversial play. And then they didn't respond well, and boom, Ohio State's running back walks right into the end zone, and it was a game for the ages. I didn't get a chance to watch a whole heck of a lot of it, but I did get the chance to catch overtime and the first overtime and the second. All I can say was, if you were looking for a game to live up to the hype from all week long, talking about the game of the century, 2 10-1 teams, Urban Meyer versus Jim Harbaugh, the game lived up to the billing, and it was great to see Michigan lose, and I was just like, oh my goodness. When Ohio State first got the ball in overtime, I was like, okay, great, they just walked right into the end zone in 2 plays. Michigan came back and answered, they showed grit, but in that second overtime, I just felt like Michigan could have made some plays even after. He gets the first down, doesn't mean you have to let him walk into the end zone. You could have still limited him to a field goal, or the play before that happens, it was, I believe, 3rd down and 8 or 9. You don't have to let them get 7.5, 8 yards to get that close on 4th down. You could have made a defensive play there, but I think Michigan faded at the end, and they just have a lot more to complain about than that one all-important 4th down call.
And I think when it comes down to putting blame on whose responsibility it was for, I don't think you can put this at all on the refs. Everyone really, and it's funny for me as a Spartan fan. Everybody, the next couple days after the game on sports radio, all they're saying is that the refs blew this and that it's unfair. And that's not the way that you should be carrying your team. You shouldn't. You're whining. You're being a child because you're crying about the refs. There were so many instances where you could have won this game before even going to overtime. You had a bunch of untimely turnovers. You gave up a pick 6. I mean, one of those fumbles was in the red zone. It's you can't do that. If you're really that good, if you were a national championship caliber team, you would have found a way to overcome even if the refs had it in for you, you would have found a way to overcome and win this game. And if you were truly better, then you would have beat them. But it just didn't work out that way.
Before the game, did you think that Michigan was better than Ohio State? I know that they had plays, the defense was playing solidly, but just top, I know Ohio State's young as well, but top to bottom, I didn't think that Michigan was better than Ohio State, and especially if when you make mistakes in a game of that magnitude, I didn't think they could come back from it.
I think it was close enough. I think Ohio State may just be a little bit better, but I think Michigan might have actually been the better team that they were playing. They were playing better the entire season, and they were putting out teams, even though that they had a pretty cupcake schedule. The Ohio State team was young, and they were probably more talented, but Michigan had the experience on defense. You had all those seniors on defense, and they put away teams the entire year. And on the biggest stage, in really the one game that counts, they weren't able to do it.
The one thing that you could point to is if you just want to start looking at the fourth quarter, U of M was outgained in yardage 127-5. What happens to Michigan when they get to the fourth quarter versus good teams, versus Iowa, versus Michigan State last year, versus Ohio State this game? They are a team that we can talk about Jim Harbaugh in his late game managing style, but it looks like they're a team that kind of changes their philosophy, and the offensive play calls seem to be a concern late in games. And this is a game where you could have put Ohio State away. You go into halftime, you could have had a bigger lead. Like you said, there's a turnover, and Ohio State comes away with halftime with some momentum. And then the second half, you totally get dominated in the fourth quarter, and it leads to an overtime game. So you can look at that. You can look at the turnovers. You could look at the offensive play calls. You could look at a lot of things that factored into Michigan losing this game.
And I think Jim Harbaugh, he went super conservative, which we've seen that with the Lions as well with Jim Caldwell, is if you have a lead, you just try to protect it, which you haven't seen Jim Harbaugh really do that all year. He's ran it up against all the cupcakes that they played. And I think what it comes down to is that even though they had moved to a conservative style offense, I'm not sure if they really have one of those closers on their team. Wilton Spate, he's an efficient quarterback, but he doesn't really scare me. He doesn't scare me in the end. None of those running backs, aside from if they actually put Jabril Peppers back at running back, none of those other running backs really scare me. I assume that most defenses could at least get a stop on those, especially a good defense like Ohio State. Mara Darbo and Chesson, we've heard so much about them, but they've pretty much become irrelevant this year. I mean, the one closer, if you want to put him on that team, would be Jake Butt, but they didn't go to him, and I just think it was a poor game management down the stretch in the biggest game of the year.
Well, it's one of those things, Jason, where Michigan had a lot to gain from winning this football game. They could have gotten to the Big Ten title game.
They had a lot to gain and a lot to lose.
A lot to lose.
Because with this loss, even with how good they performed, it is essentially a failure. Because this season was national championship or bust.
For the Michigan fans that are complaining about the officiating, you could look at it and say Ohio State was only called for 2 penalties that affected them for 6 yards. So a lot of people are walking away from the game saying the officiating was one-sided. And I understand that it's going to be tougher to get the calls in Columbus, but you could tell a little bit that there were some holding calls that they missed, some pass interference calls that they probably could have called in Michigan's favor, and they called a lot of things ticky-tack as well. So the officiating, what you want to do as officials, and everybody will say it, is you don't want to be part of the story. You don't want to be talked about, and I feel like too much this officiating crew got themselves involved in the story. So while it's not the reason why they lost, you can look to them and saying Michigan versus Ohio State deserved a much better officiating crew for a game of that magnitude. You needed a better crew.
Now, if you want to throw out all those other missed penalties and you go straight to the fourth down call and the spot that they gave them, if they were damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they kept the call, Michigan is the one who's saying that the refs are to blame. And if they change the call, then it's Ohio State who's saying it's the refs to blame. So there really wasn't any way, and that's what I said. I was watching with my wife. It was like, there's no way. If they would have overturned it, Ohio State would have just erupted. There probably would have been riots in Columbus. I mean, I'm sure that Michigan fans had a hard time getting out of there already with a win. If they would have lost that way, it would have been really tough for them to get out of there.
Man, oh man, it was such one of those things where Michigan, I really feel like for this season, could look at this as a blown opportunity. You have Jabril Peppers, you got a veteran team, a team full of upperclassmen, you got a quarterback that's serviceable, but unfortunately that injury probably derailed a lot of his season. But this team could have done a lot of things, and I think that a lot of people also are hesitant to put the blame on someone that is well respected in town. You could put a lot of things on Jim Harbaugh in that in big games going back to the Super Bowl, he coaches differently. A lot of people have looked at that and gone, his coaching style versus elite teams has resulted in situations that have probably hurt his team, and it's not really talked about a whole heck of a lot, but Jim Harbaugh could have coached a lot better in that game versus Ohio State and could have put them in situations to do a much better job. Jim Harbaugh is not blameless, and when he goes after the game and starts ripping the refs, I think it takes away from a really solid performance from both teams.
Yeah, nobody wants to blame their savior, Jim Harbaugh, even though he's the first person that you should be pointing to, that they didn't prepare enough to take away everything that Ohio State was going to throw at them. You know, Ohio State could have very well have won this game. If they wouldn't have missed those 2 field goals, that would be an entirely different game. Those are 2 chip shot field goals. We're not even talking about going to overtime and the blown and the fourth and 1 that was or wasn't. So Jim Harbaugh is the first guy who, if he was smart and a better coach, I think he should have gone up there at the end of that game in the press conference and say, you know what, this one's on me. You know, we had some tough adversity to go through with, you know, we weren't getting the calls, but, you know, it all comes down to we just weren't able to get the job done, and I take responsibility for this one.
And I'm looking at right now, foxsports.com. They specifically point out 3 areas, and the title of the headline is why Jim Harbaugh, not the officials, deserves the blame for Michigan's loss. And the first point I agree with wholeheartedly. The first point of contention that they have is why play Wilton Speight and then have him throw 36 times. You know, you got a quarterback that, by all accounts, was roughed up a couple games back. John O'Korn wasn't great, but if you're going to play Wilton Speight, why are you going to have him throw 36 times? And the other 2 things that they point out are they point out to his late game mismanagement of the clock, and they point out to the fact that he took a penalty in the third quarter when Ohio State got the ball, and there was a 50-50 call, and he went berserk, took off his headset, threw it on the ground, got himself a penalty, and that gave Ohio State some momentum. So if you look closely, Jim Harbaugh will probably look at some things and go, he could have did a much better job with clock management. He might look back with regret that he played Wilton Speight and, you know, really went aggressive and had him throw the ball 36 times in a game where, you know, you might have done a better job if you maybe ran the ball more or threw the ball less.
Yeah, and I think another thing you want to point to is you mismanage your players. You have a guy like Jabril Peppers, who I'm not huge on. I don't think he's the Heisman Trophy, the guy who's out. I'm not even convinced that he's going to be a superstar in the NFL. But if he really was, this would have been the time to showcase him, to put everything that you have in the playbook for Jabril Peppers out there. He's your best player, and I think Ohio State wouldn't have known what to do when they see him line up in the backfield. When they see him line up in the Wildcat, they know exactly what he's going to do because he's going to keep the ball. And they never deviated, you know, maybe had Jabril Peppers try to throw a crossing route on one of those Wildcats. And I just think that was another big point of contention.
And they're pointing out here, with 2 minutes and 27 seconds left in the fourth quarter, the Buckeyes had already got into field goal range. He had 2 timeouts, and he decided to let the clock run. When Barrett ran for the losses on back-to-back plays, he continued to let the clock run, in essence, playing for overtime. And on the road, I think if this strategy was used at home at the Big House, I could agree. But with 2 minutes, 27 seconds left, to let the clock run and not use your timeouts to play for overtime, I think is a bad strategy. That's why you saw D'Antonio go for 2. You see coaches on the road tend to be a little bit more aggressive and they want to win on the road. So I think that was a big mistake, not utilizing those timeouts, and it came back to haunt you because don't you think he should have known that his defense was on the field so much that the defense looked gassed? They looked like everybody that was commenting and watching kind of noticed that the Michigan defense wasn't the same in the fourth as in the first. So I think that's a big mistake. Now in hindsight, you could say, well, he is trying to, play for overtime and see what happens, take a chance. But I think in that situation, on the road, big game, you play to win the game right then and there. Don't go to overtime. I think that's what most coaches do. I don't like the safe approach in that situation. I think it's a big mistake.
I think you can argue it both ways. I think one of the reasons he might have saved those timeouts is what happens if Ohio State goes ahead and scores a touchdown? Because then if you, regardless of how much it's been run down, you still have your timeouts so you could stop the clock. So maybe they were doing that. And he also saw that Ohio State had already missed 2 field goals. So they figure, hey, put it all on that kicker. And that really, it was the biggest kick of that guy's life. And it obviously didn't work out. It's pointing to poor late game management, which he didn't have to deal with a whole lot of late game management early in the season, blowing teams out, blowing out guys like Rutgers and Maryland and whoever they played at the beginning of the season. So Jim Harbaugh didn't really have to play through that. He really wasn't in that kind of position in the beginning of the season, or really, he just didn't have to deal with that.
Now the best part is the coverage for Michigan after the game, unbelievable. You still have a lot of people advocating for Michigan to still get into the playoff. Everyone realized that Michigan, if Clemson, Washington all lose, okay, then you could probably up the debate. But here's the thing that a lot of people have pointed out and makes total sense. You can't, as a conference, the Big Ten, devalue your Big Ten title game. So you're saying that you're going to put in 2 teams, both of which did not make your conference title game. So you're going to really disrespect and make that title game meaningless if you put in Michigan and Ohio State. You can't do that. The Big Ten commissioner can't do that. He can't devalue the Big Ten title game by putting in 2 teams into the college football playoff, totally disregarding that game. So if another team from the Big Ten makes it, you got to argue that it's going to be either Penn State or Wisconsin. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think at the time of this recording, everyone has kind of started to go that it's going to be Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Washington have the edge right now in going into the Final Four to earn a spot in the college football playoff. But to argue that Michigan is still one of the best 4 teams by losing is ridiculous. And if any scenario plays out and I see Michigan in the college football playoff, I'm going to be totally shocked, and I'm going to really go then. It's not based on merit. It's just based on money and based on trying to really appease a fan base and trying to draw ratings and things like that, because Michigan's not one of the best 4 teams in the country. Maybe 5, 6, 7, you could argue, but they're not 1 through 4. And you can't get rewarded for sitting at home not doing nothing.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. I'd say that I really do think Michigan, they do have a good team this year. And I would say they're probably number 5 at this point. And if I think you could make an argument that they actually may have a better team than Ohio State, but Ohio State is the team that beat them. So it's unfortunate that it works out that way, but I think you would have to have a colossal upset of teams. You would need both Clemson and Washington to both lose in their conference championship games. And I think you may even need Alabama to lose, because so if Clemson, Washington lose, then I would imagine you get Alabama, Ohio State, and then whoever wins the Big Ten championship. I mean, what, are you really going to put in 3 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff?
That's not going to happen.
That's dumb.
That's not going to happen.
I think Oklahoma would probably get in before Michigan.
Exactly. So for Michigan fans listening, I'm sorry. Your dreams of getting into the college football playoff the year after Michigan State did it is not going to happen. Accept your Orange Bowl bid and go from there. Maybe we could have a kind of dream scenario and face off against Western Michigan. See what happens, because a lot of people are starting to look at it and go, maybe Western could hang with Michigan. Not win the game, but they could hang maybe into the third, late into the fourth quarter.
That would be if Western were to play Michigan in a bowl game and Western to actually win. That would be amazing.
And now
how funny would that be?
I still don't think Western has enough to.
You never know.
I don't know. You never know. But PJ Fleck with the distractions, I know
row the boat.
There's got to be a little bit of distraction, wondering with his players if he's going to stay, go to Purdue, go to Notre Dame, end up somewhere else. But the talks are heating up that potentially he could end up at a Big Ten school, or that he is taking offers. But a lot of people are still wondering. It's up in the air what's going to happen with PJ Fleck. But he's done a great job. I would love to see the game. I would actually sit down, plan a day around it, and watch Michigan versus Western Michigan. That would be kind of awesome.
For sure. So I think after the bowl game, because I think we're both decided that it would take a ton for Michigan to even get a chance.
It's not deserved. It's not deserved in any level, and it's just a bunch of fans trying to really cope with the devastating loss. But I do want to talk to Michigan fans because I think the expectations this year got to a level, based upon hype, which I saw, they had way too high of expectations for this team. This is where you probably should be. I thought I had them losing to Michigan State and Ohio State, going 10-2 in that vein with this team. You still got to remember that this group of talent is not Jim Harbaugh's talent yet. Jim Harbaugh has gotten you 10 wins his first year, 10 wins, potentially 11 in his second year. I understand that he might have been hyped up to be at the caliber of, a Nick Saban, but the likes of Urban Meyer, where he goes undefeated his first year, aren't too often. They don't occur too often. Jim Harbaugh is not Urban Meyer. Jim Harbaugh is not Nick Saban. So give him time. Would you rather I would take this in a heartbeat, 10 wins every single year, and to compete versus your number one rivals in a couple years. Now, people are looking at it collectively going, well, Michigan has lost 5 years in a row to Ohio State, 12 of the last 13. But besides that first year with Jim Harbaugh getting blown out by Ohio State, this is a good team. It's a good indication of where this team is going. They're trending upward, and now you're going to see in his third year what he can do with a big loss of talent. But if you're a Michigan fan already calling for the head of Jim Harbaugh because of 2 years not beating Ohio State, that's really, really tough, and I feel bad because he ain't going anywhere. No one's checking him, and he's got it pretty good. I think that Jim Harbaugh is the guy there, and he's a guy that's going to be there for a long time. Just relax and enjoy the ride. It's going to be a good one.
Anybody calling for Jim Harbaugh's head is delusional, because who else are you going to bring in at this point? Are you going to bring in PJ Fleck? Is he really going to do better than Jim Harbaugh? No, that's ridiculous. But I do think Jim Harbaugh's seat, his khaki, laid seat, is getting a little bit warm, because first 2 years you have done well, but you've lost the only game that fans really care about. They really only care about Ohio State. I mean, obviously they're going to care if you go, 5-5, but if you beat Ohio State, it almost nullifies everything. And you've lost 2 years in a row. And now going into your third year, I really question about what that team is going to be like. Now,
Wilton Spade's probably going to come back and compete for the starting job. So that's pretty much a solid position that you saw him evolve. He could throw a great deep ball. He's a solid leader, but yeah, you're going to lose a lot of talent.
Yeah, but
is
he going to even be the starter next year? They got the Dylan McCaffrey, the Brandon Peters. Wilton Spade they're not even sure if he's going to be the quarterback next year.
We'll see. I think he's going to have a strong chance to compete.
And then you have to rebuild your entire defense. I think this team is going to regress next year. And I would love to.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'd love to hear from our Michigan guy. What is it, Brandon Justice? I'd love to hear from him on what this team is going to be next year. And I obviously, him being a Michigan guy, he's going to have the rosy glasses on, the Amarillo and blue glasses on. So, but I think this team, it's not going to be, I would say 8 or 9 wins. I think you're going to have all this loss of talent. You saw what happened to Michigan State this year. They lost a ton of talent, and you're almost losing your entire defense next year.
But the big games are at home. Again, you got Ohio State coming into the big house, Michigan State coming to the big house.
Doesn't matter if you don't have talent, though.
I think Jim Harbaugh, you can't say that they don't have talent. He's recruiting very, very well in a lot of different regions.
You know who else recruited talent? Brady Hoke. And so did Rich Rod. They all recruited talent. And it's what is he going to do with it? And even if they do have the best talent in the world, they still need experience.
And you have rumors again now that some of his assistants might take on other jobs. I think his Tim Drevno might have an opportunity to get a head coaching job. So we'll see what happens. But I would say at this point in time, Michigan fans should hold their heads high, really look forward to the future, and understand that just because you're not Michigan State and you haven't earned a spot in the Big Ten title game yet, you haven't sniffed the college football playoff, it's okay. The program's still going to be fine under Jim Harbaugh. I think that the loss to Ohio State is still devastating, yes, but you're much closer now than you were 2 years ago. Jim Harbaugh is the guy, but you're exactly right. He's now opened himself up to skepticism, which anybody that's been realistic and looked at it has said. He has to perform and do his best when the lights are the brightest. And so far, in the biggest of big games, he hasn't gotten that big signature win just yet. But does that mean he's never going to get it? I would argue that if you doubt Jim Harbaugh, you're going to probably be looking at egg all over your face, because it's a good coach, and he brings in good talent, and he's got himself a system where it looks like it can be repeatable, 8, 9, 10 wins every year. And we'll have a chance to debate whether that's going to be good enough every year, but I do believe he'll take a step. I do believe Michigan in the next 2 or 3 years will be in the Big Ten title game. They will sniff the college football playoff each and every year. But if he continues to have some of these setbacks in big games, then you'll start to look at potentially, is this the guy that's going to take you to where you need to go? But in year 2, please, you would think a guy with that caliber is going to get at least 4 or 5 years, because just look at the first 2 years with Nick Saban. He didn't win a national title. Like I said, people have short memories and they think, oh, Urban Meyer went to Ohio State and went undefeated. But those things are anomalies. That's not the norm. He's going to need 2 or 3 or 4 years. Let him, recruit his own guy. And that's where I'll leave it. But it was a tough loss. We can high five and go, it didn't work out.
Do you think Michigan fans are going to have to give him a pass next year as well?
No.
If they do have a setback, because they actually are going to be tested early next year. They aren't
Florida.
Playing the Cup. They got Florida, they got Cincinnati, and they have Air Force, which Air Force has actually looked good. They always look pretty good.
Listen, it's a big boy business. You don't get passes. You got to play well. You can't make key mistakes coaching and hurting your team. But I think he'll put the team in the best position. Probably he's going to come out of that 2-1.
I mean, if he comes out 1-2,
ooh, that'd be great. I'd love that.
Because I think Florida would probably be the best. That's probably the one where I'd point that would probably be a loss. Cincinnati, you should be able to take care of. I think Air Force, just because of the style of offense that they play, because they play that wacky Air Force offense, they may give them some trouble.
Ooh, Jason coming out and putting it out there that Michigan might struggle.
I preface this all with, I am a gigantic Michigan hater, but I am just looking at this as seeing this isn't UCF, this isn't Hawaii, these are actual teams who you see play on ESPN every now and then.
You know why I'm proud of you, too? Because you took your vitriol to Facebook, and I know some people were like, oh, why are you showing so much hate? And you're like, hey, everyone knows I don't like Michigan, so that was awesome. I love it. When Michigan loses, I know I can look to you to throw some digs out there. And, hey, I think you caught on to my sarcasm when I put on Twitter, man, Michigan lost, and you tweeted back with a capital LOL. You knew I was being facetious. That was awesome. I was like, because we have a lot of Michigan fans that follow us, so I tried to kind of balance it out, but in the inside, I was definitely happy. I was thrilled they lost.
If you're a Michigan fan, you can say whatever you want to me. And I'm just always going to root against your team. I always respect my wife because I'm always spending time with her. But she went out to lunch with her family that day, and they were saying, "Oh, you have to root for Michigan today, because everyone hates Ohio." And I was like, she was like, I'm not sure about Jason, and I was like, "Yep, I'm never going to root for Michigan."
Good for you. No, that's and thankfully we'll end it with that, is that Michigan State season ended. Let's just really evaluate completely what the hell happened. And I'm glad the season ended. It was an abysmal year. It never happened. 2016, one that no one's going to remember for much of anything. But
Michigan fans will remember it because they're going to point it out next year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But hey, we'll take the 10 years of success versus one bad year. You got to pick the right quarterback in essence. When you pick the wrong quarterback, this kind of stuff happens. And Michigan State will pick the right quarterback going forward. I got to believe that. Stay with us. Going to commercial break. We'll talk about the Detroit Lions to wrap up this podcast on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Doc here for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We're a collection of Detroit Sports podcasts dedicated to all things Detroit sports. We're running daily podcasts, and we've been able to keep the microphones hot, the lights on here in the Sterling Heights studios by your support. And we thank you very much. All we ask is if you like what you're listening to, tell a friend, tell somebody, hey, there's this podcast network, subscribe via iTunes, and follow us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. And we've been so thankful and lucky that we've gained a lot of support in the last 3 years, and we've been able to continue to add new shows, get credentialed around town, and be able to report on the significant happenings in and around the city of Detroit. To support us, visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Click through those banner links. It helps us, and you can support us for absolutely nothing. Free. All you got to do, visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. We greatly appreciate it.
Motor City Sports Rant, Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What is this? A fine jam, sir.
This is Zanny Family by Future. Maybe we can get another one of those, crazy podcast episodes where it gets like 5,000 downloads.
Jason, that podcast is just being downloaded nonstop. I'll tell you off air what the numbers are, but oh my goodness. I don't know if it was the music. I don't know if it was our hot takes about Michigan State. But yeah, it's flying off the shelf. I don't even know if it's an anomaly, but it's a great number to have, and I'll show you after we're done. But, we're sitting here having a good old time because our NFL football team has come out of Thanksgiving, and now we're sitting at 7-4, and the talk this week has been about potentially earning a spot in the postseason, a home game, a potential run in the playoffs, a quarterback that might be going to the Hall of Fame. The talk when you have a good football team, the air is just so much better. I mean, Jim Caldwell is a little bit more, he's less tense. He's more agreeable to talk to the media. He's not so crotchety. And when you're a 7-4 football team and you earn 7 wins late in the fourth quarter, it just really goes to show you that the team that a lot of people kind of discounted and thought that wasn't going to do much this year is a solid football team, because in the NFL, damn near 75% of the games are close, and you've walked away from your 11 games with 7 wins. Matthew Stafford doing his thing, the defense doing their thing. Minnesota imploded, and you got to take advantage. I think people are now starting to realize that there's a lot of parity in the NFL, and it has to do with not only with how the Lions play, but it also has something to do with how your opponent plays. Sam Bradford's read there late in the game was terrible, and in the end, it cost him the game, but the Lions did a lot of good things to win that football game. We're sitting here 7-4, and it's nice to talk about a football team that's playing this well.
Yeah, I mean, how many of these games have really been decided on 1 or 2 plays? I mean, I think we have at least 2 or 3, and I'm not counting just the field goal. These are games that have been decided on 1 play or 2 plays here, an interception or a fumble recovery. And, if you watch that game on Thursday, it really wasn't that good. Both teams weren't really able to do a whole lot. And, I would actually want to see more from Matthew Stafford. He was really the prototypical game manager in this game. He had like 230 yards, 1 touchdown. And the biggest thing is that he didn't turn over the ball, which that's something that you can be happy about, but you want to see more production. And it's really showing how not having a running game is affecting this team.
But you look at how they start the game. I mean, Matthew Stafford drives the team down the field, a lot of key plays, and again, a guy that he's got a solid connection with is Anquan Boldin, and they've been on page, on point for the better part of the entire year. He's a guy that you can count on as a safety valve, and in that first drive, he goes down the field, and I know that it stunk that Minnesota was able to kind of come back and drive early on to make it a tie game, but the way they're starting shows that they're receiving the coaching well, they understand the first 15, they're executing well, and there's a lot of positives to build on. But I think what is excellent, and a lot of people are also looking at, is you're doing this without the solid connection of Marvin Jones with Matthew Stafford for whatever reason, and the likely reason is that defenders are locking in on Marvin Jones. They know that, okay, they're just going to try to bracket on his side and not allow him to go deep. They try to go deep to him. They're just not executing on the same page. And offensively, they're getting a lot of yards after the catch, which shows they're hustling, they're trying, they're not just going down with quick contact. And that offense, whether I personally like it or not, which I don't, this dink and dunk 6 to 8 yard offense is working. And I see it across the league.
And that's really what you have to choose. You have to choose, are you okay with a less powered offense, a dink and dunk, just go for 3 to 7 yards a play? Or do you take the risk with going down the field more often and then seeing more turnovers?
It's obvious the Lions don't want no risk. They just want to be ultra conservative and figure out a way to get up the field, and they've done it. This offense has been put together, but you could make an argument when people look at critiques of this team. The offense is predictable. They run the ball, they try to run the ball a little bit too much, and they do when they are stopped on the run, they try to keep going with it. But a team that passes this much and that effectively, you just got to really kind of be one-sided because they try to run the football, but it's just not effective yet because you don't got a solid number one.
And I think they run a little bit too much, but I'm okay with them at least trying it and sticking with it because you're keeping defenses honest. Because you never know when you have that halfback draw from the shotgun and Theo Riddick is going to take it 25 yards. Because if you can at least get one of those chunk plays in a game, then you make the defense at least have to respect that. You can't they aren't just going to sit back and have 7 guys in the defensive backfield. You at least have to respect Theo Riddick possibly being able to make a move here or there. So I think I'd like to see a little bit less. I think they still have to keep going with it, even though they don't have a number one guy, which I want a number one guy. And that's one of the things that I want them to look for in the draft this year.
Definitely. And then, obviously you are still correct as of this point. DeAndre Levy did not suit up, but they're still getting solid defensive efforts. I mean, literally, it seems like it's been a long time since a team has dropped 20 points on the Lions. Their defense is really doing a lot of good things that are keeping the Lions in good standing and doing some good things. Now, the thing that I like is the defense, while not super talented across collectively as a unit, individually they're making some plays. Tahir Whitehead's doing some things. Kerry Hyder's doing some good things. Ziggy Ansah's continuing to emerge. Big play Slay shows up, in the last couple games. Now what we kind of have earned him is one big play Slay. So we need to get him multiple big plays. In that in most games, he is, targeted a little bit more than I would like. And I think he's overpaid based upon what I think his value is. But he's still a solid cornerback. He's still a guy that I would want on my team.
Yeah, everyone's pitching in just enough to hold teams. And one guy that I think you need to point out, at least in these last 2 games, who could really contribute going forward is Miles Killebrew. He's a guy who didn't really get a lot of play at the beginning of the season, but now with halfway through the season, we need to get fresh legs out there. Miles Killebrew is kind of playing that safety linebacker hybrid that we even kind of see Jabril Peppers play in Michigan, that he's playing up towards the line, and he's actually giving us coverage on tight ends, which is something that we haven't had all year because DeAndre Levy is going through whatever he's going through. And I will stick with that we're never going to... DeAndre Levy's done. I think it's just a foregone conclusion. I think he's going to play out the rest of he's going to last the rest of this season so he can get his tenure and he can get out of the league.
Now, was that right? Was this the game where Matt Prater could have had a chance to kick like a long field goal at halftime and Caldwell decided not to do it and versus Minnesota?
I think it was. It might have been. I know what you're talking about, where it would have been like the longest field goal in history, but it was still in his wheelhouse. Like I think it would have been like a 66-yard field goal, but you're in a dome.
Do you think that in that situation, whether it's this game or a different one, that Caldwell made the right choice?
You always you're trying to minimize risk, and I guess the worst case scenario would have been he tries to kick that, and then what if that team has a guy back there? They're probably going to have a guy back there because you're kicking such a long field goal, and then they rush it back, and then they completely flip-flop the tables on you.
And then we saw it in the Denver game Sunday night. I mean, to try that long a field goal was unbelievable decision by Gary Kubiak, and it came back to bite him because in essence, KC only needed 10 yards to get the win. And it's a decision that's been talked about and debated, in that the similar situation happened to the Lions, and the Lions didn't choose to do that. But it's a little bit different situation in that was at the half. This is in overtime. I personally would have played for the tie in overtime. But, a lot of people are arguing, hey, you play to win. But in that situation, it was late, and you try I think it was a 62-yarder, and he had enough leg. Did you see the kick? My goodness, it just hooked, left of the goalpost there. But that was one of the crazy calls that a lot of people are talking about. But in talking about Matt Prater, special teams and the kicking game,
it's the best part of the teams right now.
That's what's winning you games. You're winning games within one score every single week, and I like the fact that he comes out and says, "Listen, don't call timeout because freezing me doesn't work." And it's shown not to. He's a guy that's just been able to go out there and be steady. Missed a couple here and there, a couple, errant extra points. But all in all, is a guy that it's been a seamless transition from Jason Hansen to, I know they tried a couple before Prater, but once we got Prater, and it seems like he solved his issues, whatever they were with the bottle, it's a guy that could be a kicker here for quite a bit of time. And he's got a lot of leg, a booming leg.
And Prater is a guy who I'm starting to get okay with him missing a field goal or an extra point in the beginning of games, because it seems like whenever that happens, he's not going to miss the rest of that game. You know that every other kick after he misses one, he is just going to kick it as hard as he possibly can, and he could probably kick like a 70-yard field goal at that point. So it's much different than Jason Hansen. And, there are situations that we've been in where I think Prater would have been a better kicker than Jason Hansen at this point, because we've had to kick. We don't have to get as far onto the field for Matt Prater to be in range. We used to have to get at least to like the 35 to really be in Hansen's range, and that's even on the edge of his range. Prater 35, you're pretty much a guarantee at that point, because that's a 52, 55, 57-yard field goal. Prater can easily kick that.
It was the game versus Minnesota, because I tweeted Adam, halftime debate, Hail Mary or 67-yard try. It would have been 67 yards, and they just went for the Hail Mary there, and it didn't execute. So, but in that situation, it didn't turn out to be that devastating, but I did definitely, looking at my tweets throughout the game, I was saying that I think they just need to open up the offense a little bit more by throwing deeper to Marvin Jones, or even letting, Golden Tate run a deep route here and there to open up the running game. Because is there any other solution to help this run game? I mean, the offensive line's doing the best that they can, and Minnesota's defense is known for, solid play and making it difficult for opponents to run on them. But it's just one of those things where, how are you going to open up the offense when everyone knows you're throwing it 6 to 10 yards and your running backs aren't the best? You got to take some deep chances, and you got to execute it. So there's a fine line between, being conservative, and if you throw the ball 50, 60 yards, it's like a punt. So you got a defense that has been bend, don't break. Early in games, I think they need to take a couple more chances, is all I would say. It's my critique of this team.
If, with Matt Stafford not having Calvin Johnson anymore, and even though he's playing out of his mind, probably playing the best of his career, he may even be having an MVP season this year. Is he actually afraid to throw downfield? Because when you threw downfield before, you would be probably throwing it to Calvin Johnson, and you know that there is a really good chance that he's either going to go up and come down with it, or he can at least make a play on the ball or draw a pass interference. Marvin Jones, we haven't really seen a ton of opportunities, but what we've seen so far is it hasn't worked out. And I think Golden Tate, as good as he is, I don't think he really isn't that deep threat guy, because it's really going to be a battle for whoever he's with, and that's only if he's with one guy. So we don't really have that guy who's your deep threat, who can get separation and to be the guy who can be that long pass guy. And I think Stafford might actually be a little worried. He's seeing how good he's been and been able to do getting chunk plays and yards after the catch. I think he may actually be evolving that he doesn't need that kind of a play.
And plus, with that offensive line, if one guy doesn't get the right block, he's going to get crunched. It's hard to execute. I'm just saying you got to try it once or twice in the first quarter instead of waiting until late in the half or beginning of the second half.
I think we would have seen it at least once in that game on the stupid offsides that the refs whistled it off. He was so pissed about that.
It's just, again, a lot of situations where the refs weren't that great in this game. The halftime act was horrid. What did you think, before we talk a little bit more about the Lions and Matthew Stafford, what did you think about Aretha? Because I actually had a situation where my first instinct was wrong. When it was going down, I texted Adam. I'm like, oh, man, I would tweet a lot of jokes about this, but it's the national anthem. I think it would be wrong. I think we'd get a lot of flack if I tweeted some jokes, or I was like, this is like a 10-minute anthem, bro. And he's like, yeah, dude, this is taking forever. So I'm like, I was going to put a hashtag, things that happened before Aretha's, anthem was done. I was going to tweet some funny jokes. And I'm like, no, I'm going to be reserved. I think at this time, if I tweeted something like that, it would get backlash. All of a sudden, I'm checking Twitter, which I'm prone to do during games, and the jokes that came out were utterly hilarious. A sports program director wrote that he'd grow a full head of hair when that anthem was done. CBS even trolled her, put the 4 minutes plus anthem on there. And I was like, wow, I was pretty wrong. The thought in my head was actually true. A lot of people thought that the anthem was a little bit dramatic. And other people were like, hell, she earned it, but that was some anthem, bro.
Yeah, I think you can go both ways. Where it was soulful, and I think it was powerful, and that's what I think that's what I initially thought at first. I'm like, probably the first like 2 verses, I'm like, wow, this is really powerful. But then it's like, okay, she's starting to miss some words. She's starting to mess up some words.
What?
It's getting long.
So, and the fact that she kept repeating some words 3 and 4 times was like, and I realized it's a 2.5 minute song max. 4.5 minutes, bro.
Dude, it's like a 1.5-minute song. I listened to the anthem on, what was it? I forget what I listened it on, but it was like a 1.5 minutes. It was boom, boom, boom. It's done. And I think my biggest thing is that, dude, she didn't have a tooth. She was missing a tooth.
Oh, was she? I didn't get that.
She was missing a tooth in her front teeth.
I thought.
I looked at it, I'm like, what?
The thing that wardrobe-wise was like, well, she's wearing like a winter hat inside. So I was looking like, okay, but you know what? All in all, it's something that will live in infamy. But dude, seriously, when the Dallas gets a national country star, and we're getting a guy I never heard of. I guess I heard of the songs that he was singing, but the performance was.
I've heard of Andy Grammer. He has a couple decent songs, but they're pop songs.
Not good. And just sitting there on the field and
at least it's not
lip-syncing.
Nickelback.
Yeah, it's not Nickelback. But anyway, so the other news of the week is that Caldwell kind of was challenged and asked to follow up when he said that he kind of felt like Matthew Stafford was trending towards being a Hall of Fame quarterback. And he kind of scaled back a little bit and was like, hey, read my words carefully. I said that, hey, I think that he's on his way. It's going to be up to him to decide. But at this point in time, he's got numbers that would indicate that he's on his way. And I actually agree with Caldwell in that if he continues on this path, he is a quarterback on his way. But I think he should have added that what Matthew, it's going to depend on Matthew, and what's going to be an ultimate factor is not the fact that he might throw for 70, 75,000 yards, 1 million touchdowns, playing for the Lions for so many years. It's going to be about a season like 2016 where you got a team that's got some late game heroics in them. Do you take this team on a run? This is a team that if they play well, get some guys back, should be a team that could get a one postseason win if Matthew Stafford plays at that level that he's done throughout the regular season. Let's see what he does, but he is on his way, and it's not a ridiculous comment.
Yeah, and really, it's not even going to be about stats. I think it's going to come down to playoff wins, and does he get a Super Bowl ring? And I think there's definitely a chance where he doesn't win a Super Bowl, but he still makes it in. But in that instance, he would have to have multiple playoff wins. He need to be going to the playoffs for consecutive years, winning some wild cards, winning some divisionals, and at least getting to NFC championship games and playing tight games. And it's doing stuff like that. You saw Dan Marino. He never won a Super Bowl, but he produced. He got in the playoffs. He won games. And so that's really what it's going to come down to. And it will ultimately be on Matthew Stafford.
And this game coming up on the road versus the Saints, I kind of want to see it to be a shootout. This could be a game where it could be very entertaining, or it could be one that is going to get away from the Lions. We'll see. We're going to talk to, on the Doc and Jock podcast, hopefully connect with Josh Katzenstein, who used to be the Lions beat writer. We're going to connect with him and get a sense of what's going on over there with the Saints, but they're playing a better brand of football. The Lions are going to have to keep up, in essence, because Drew Brees is on point with his receivers. That offense is clicking. He's throwing 3, 4, 5 touchdowns a week, and it's going to be on the road, so it's going to be a tough game. But going forward for the rest of the 5 games that they got, they're going to have to get another marquee win. They're going to have to beat the Giants. They're going to have to try to get a win versus Dallas. Maybe versus Green Bay it might come down to. Another game versus the Bears. You need 1 or 2 more wins to really solidify what's going to go on. But I'm not too concerned with what's going to happen. I just want to see the Lions play well versus the Saints and to look like you belong. Because it's going to be a tough game. The Saints are trying to get, really keep things going because they started off, not so great, but they've been playing as of late a solid brand of football.
Yeah, they have the best offense in the NFL right now. And this is a game where it could get out of hand. And I think earlier in the season, I would have said that this is a game that the Lions are probably going to lose. And the Lions, I kind of have a feeling that they might prove us wrong here. That I think they might be able to stay in this game. And it's going to really be on the offenses. I think the special teams and defense has kept this team into games the last couple of weeks. This is going to be a game where the offense needs to show up because I don't think you can say to this defense, hold this team to 24 points.
I say first team to 30 wins it. First team to 30 you're going to need 30. You're going to need 30 and maybe try to hold Drew Brees late with a couple of turnovers. But in a team like that, you can defend well if you get some pressure, force some turnovers. He's got some turnovers in him, but I think for the Lions to win, you're not winning 16-13 versus the Saints. No, I don't see that. It's going to be a game minimum in the 20s, and I think that to win the game, you got to be in the mid-30s.
Unless your defense has an amazing performance in them, I think it's going to be a very close game. But I think it's still
enjoyable.
It's still a winnable game. I think the worst thing to happen would be a blowout loss for them to go 35-6 or 9, just to not have an offensive touchdown, because this is a defense that you should be able to put some points on. So you should try and open up the offense a little bit on this team.
And you know what that means? Maybe more touches for Eric Ebron, more touches for Anquan Bolden, maybe a couple deep plays that can occur for Marvin Jones. This might be the game where they break out, but this also might be the game where Stafford turns it over a little bit more because they got to take some chances. But we shall see. Week by week, it's a team that you can invest in. What's going to happen? Nobody knows. That's why we've just taken the stance at the podcast, or at least I have, one game at a time. They're trending upward. They're playing well. They're earning respect all over the league, and they're 7-4 as we speak. So with that, we can wrap up.
Lions going to the playoffs.
Lions going to the playoffs. Yes, sir. For Jason Jarvie, I'm the Doc, Motor City Sports Rant. Thank you for coming in. I know the schedule is all out of whack, but I appreciate your time.
Later.
Okay, nice, idiot. F you. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.